Hello, all. Welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by Husky Harry, huggable homos who love film, to dish up a little bit of movie news and review a film, either current or classic. My wonderful co-hosts are with me, as usual, to help us unpack a very big movie this week. We'll be discussing Alien Covenant, the newest installment of the Alien/Prometheus franchise by director and visionary Sir Ridley Scott. But let me introduce you to my partners in crime before we start to dive into that discussion. Jim Pugliafico is here with us. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, and welcome to the podcast, everyone.
Will Lindis is with us as well. Welcome, Will.
Hello, boys, girls, and xenomorphs. So good to be with you tonight.
Glad to have both of you with me for what is sure to be a fun discussion. We're going to be dishing up a little bit of movie news here as well. But guys, I have to admit something kind of crazy to you. Are you ready for me to drop a bomb?
We're ready. What you got?
Will, I totally mixed up some dates or screwed up our calendar or something. I know I've been promising this like epic let's see a movie with longtime listeners Darren and Walt this next weekend while you're here. Unfortunately, I got a text message from Darren on Friday while I was working saying, hey, we just landed in Tucson. We'll be there in 40 minutes. And I'm like, what? So we hung out with them this weekend. It was amazing. It was awesome. But Will, I apologize. We will not be able to see a movie with them with you, but we'll still get to hang out with you if that works for you.
I'm very excited for that. I will be landing in the great state of Arizona this Friday, and I'm excited to see what are our options like Baywatch and Pirates of the Caribbean. So I don't know that I'm excited about the offerings, but I'm excited about seeing those offerings with you.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely pumped to hang out with you in our corner of the world this coming weekend. Of course, we love seeing you in Austin, but it'll be fun to hang out here as well. We had a great weekend with Darren and Walt, as well as our friend Larry. They're sort of our trifecta of crazy, awesome Canadian friends. Jim, tell us a little bit about our movie-going experience with those guys this weekend.
Yeah, we got to see the Alien movie with them this weekend, and a couple of other friends too that are local friends, Steve and Sam. So yeah, it was great. I mean, I don't think they had ever been to like a movie theater with like the reclining. We took them to the latest multiplex here, and they have the power reclining seats and the giant screen and all that, and they really had a good time at the movies. They're Alien franchise fans. We actually all watched Prometheus before we went to go see Alien Covenant, so kind of freshen us up on all the things that were revealed in Prometheus and the things that were kind of still questions that may or may not have gotten answered in Covenant. But yeah, we had a great time with those guys. It was great seeing them again.
It's a hell of a quadruple header.
Yeah.
I know.
Get the head inside the head on the aliens. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, it was fun to see the film with those guys. Absolutely. We definitely had a great weekend hanging out with them. I have something funny movie related that I have to share with you, Will, and I guess our listeners who may be watching. You may have seen it on Facebook, but after the movie was over, our friend Darren wanted to go to like an adult store just to kind of check out the offerings there. So I come up to the counter and I see something that I had to irresponsibly spend money on. With the new Thor movie coming out, what geek collection wouldn't be complete without a Mjolnir dildo? Can you believe this thing? That's crazy, right?
So apparently, if you're the one that grips it, you're worthy, right?
That's right. So apparently I'm worthy. Here's the other cool thing. You know how Thor's always swinging around his hammer?
Ooh. I love, too, that, like, we can very innocuous, like, if you were to put that in the background behind you, just sort of propped up at an angle, that sort of thing, we could technically have a dildo in every single episode of the Movie Bears podcast and it not be, like, super obvious, like we've got a giant sex toy hanging out with us. So
that's pretty true.
I kind of love this idea.
Also, what's cool about this is, Thor's always yelling for Asgard. Well, check it out. The hammer itself isn't Asgard because
it has an Asgard.
Too far. It has an Asgard.
And soon your F will be Thor.
This would be like a really cool gavel for like our bear meeting. Oh God. Anyway,
we call this meeting of the Tucson sodomites to order.
Is it dishwasher safe?
I don't know. I'll have to look at the box. Some of them are, some of them aren't. I don't actually foresee this getting any use as a dildo, but I'll look for you, Jim. We'll see what it says.
Have you seen the Guardians of the Galaxy ones?
Oh God, yes. The Drax the Destroyer is particularly crazy.
There are veins on veins on veins on that thing.
I have not seen that.
Oh, Google
What?
it.
Really?
They are impressive. The Guardians of the Galaxy sex toys. I think you just search for that, you'll find them. They are amazing.
So I think I'll wait until after the show because I don't want to crash the show at this point. My computer.
Yeah, they're pretty crazy. I'm trying to see if I can actually go back in and find that real quick. Just so that you can see it, Jim. And for our listeners who may be listening and you're curious, but I'm not immediately finding it. So you know what? Google it on your own. Google dildos on your own time, people. We already gave you one. We can't give them all to you.
I'll Google it on my mobile Googler. How's that?
Yeah.
There you go. Your Turing machine, right?
When really is the wrong time to search for sex toys on your phone?
That's pretty true. I mean, I think it fits at any time, right?
Yeah.
So
it fits.
It's totally appropriate. Hey, quick shout out to some fine folks who are with us in the live chat. Hey, Austin King, CRS 42066, Weeping Jay, glad to have you guys with us. We've got a bunch of other folks who are hanging out with us as well, who haven't dropped us a line in the live chat yet. So as we're talking about Alien Covenant tonight and talking through some of our movie news, feel free to drop us a line in that live chat. Let us know your thoughts on the film or what we're talking about, and we'll be happy to give you a shout out on air. But welcome everyone who's listening live as well as on digital tape delay to the audio version of the show through iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and our website, of course. Before we get into our movie review for this week, we do have some movie news to bust out for you. Jim and Will, are you guys ready to get this show on the road?
Let's dive right in.
As ready as we're going to be.
All right. Well, that said, here we go then with a little bit of movie news. All right. So, Will, why don't you kick us off this week? What's got your interest?
Yeah. So one of the news items that's really interested me / had me paying very, very close attention to the news this week has been some of the stuff coming out of the Cannes Film Festival. Very specifically, there was a bit of a kerfuffle last week, kind of in the lead up to the festival, about a pair of films that were going to be Netflix premieres. And part of this is because there's some special rules in France in terms of like the way films have to play theatrically before they appear on Netflix. And Netflix just released is just going to release these films straight on their platform without a theatrical run outside of the festival. And so a lot of people have been sort of clutching their pearls. You know, Netflix is coming to take away my movies. It's coming to take away my theatrical experience. These films aren't as worthy, etc. One of the films is a film that is by a filmmaker that I think that all of us here are pretty partial to, and that's Bong Joon-ho, South Korean filmmaker. He gave us Snowpiercer. He gave us Memories of Murder. He gave us The Host, which is so damn cool. And through Netflix, he gives us the film, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Okja. It's a movie with Tilda Swinton, who we love. It's a movie with Paul Dano, who we love. And so the big news about this film is during the screening of it, the Netflix logo pops up on the screen and the Cannes film crowd just boos, 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 boos. Why is this interesting to me? I feel that personally, I'm a big fan of Netflix and what it's actually done for film. There are a lot of films that are getting picked up out of the festival circuit really quickly. The filmmakers are being paid for their works, and it's being distributed through an outlet where people are able to see it. Films like Macon Blair's I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore, which premiered at Sundance and got a release on Netflix a month later. One of my favorite films of the year. Had it not gone through that route, I might still be hunting for a theater to go see that at right now. Or if I didn't live in a large city like Austin, I might never get a chance to see it. I may have to just sort of wait until it slowly wanders out down the line. So I find it a bit of a problem that what I consider to be a platform that's, not without its faults, but one that by and large has extended the platform by which independent film reaches the masses, got such a poor reaction from the crowd. Now, I guess the cool stinger on top of all of that is the film was apparently good enough that it got a standing ovation once the closing credits played. But I don't know. This whole thing has been such a clusterfuck. Have you guys heard anything about this? What's your thought on kind of the Netflix empire?
Well, first, I mean, I think we ought to set the stage a little bit. I mean, Cannes is known to be, the Cannes audience is known to be kind of the I guess, and quotes are around this, the elite of cinema, film festivals. And they've been known to boo movies that are pretty good movies at the end. I mean, when we go to film festivals and we see a bad movie, nobody really in the U.S. stands up and boos the movie.
No.
But they do it, I guess they do it pretty regularly over there for movies that they don't agree with or whatever. So here you got one where the booing starts like right off the bat because you have Netflix up there. And I don't know if they're necessarily booing just at Netflix because they think Netflix is the bad guy here, or it's just kind of the whole VOD independent filmmaker platforms kind of getting more muscle in the business and maybe, exerting themselves and changing the landscape of how we're going to see movies. And it is changing. And this is really, I think, just a reaction to change, right? People are generally reluctant to change. And I think the booing you're seeing is an audience that's like, oh my God, they're going to kill cinema and ruin the movie-going experience. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Who knows? In 20 years, 25 years, those of us who are still here, are they going to be lamenting the days of, oh yeah, man, remember when we used to all go to the same place and watch movies, like in the theater, before we just like clicked on this box in our living room? Who knows how it's going to change? But hey, change is here. Yeah, I heard about this thing, and it's, to me, it's just a reaction to the change, and we'll see what happens. I think, like Will said, I think there's good things. We'll see how it on cinema right now, whether it be VOD releases or pirating and everything else. I think film purists see it like as an eroding of the experience, and that's what they're reacting to.
Hey guys, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop us right there. Jim, your audio is dropping in and out and skipping, and it's like way digitally distorted.
Shoot, I don't know what to tell you then.
Do you have like any like Internet Explorer windows or anything open right now?
Let's see.
The joys of doing it live.
I only have, let me see, I can close that one. I mean, everything I have open I need, so.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
It may just be Google being Google. I would say probably just in the editing, you may have to get a little creative.
Oh, boy.
But
okay.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine. Most of what you said was okay. I think it was just the last, like, I don't know, 40 seconds or so. It was pretty.
Well, if it continues, I may have to shut down and log back in.
All right. Well, we'll see how it goes. No worries.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But awesome. So, Jim, did you just kind of want to like back that up a little bit, just to kind of go back to what you were saying?
Okay, sure. Like to the beginning.
I would say maybe halfway.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's helpful.
All right. No, I like I said, I think this is just a reaction of the typically fickle Cannes movie audience to the general erosion of the cinema experience, and kind of feels like that Netflix and the Amazons, whatever, with their original content, are kind of a threat to cinema as they know it. So, and I think that's the reaction. Change can be good. I think we're seeing some good come out of this. I don't know if it's going to kill cinema or not. I hope not. I doubt it, but you never know. Like I said, 30, 40 years from now, we may be sitting here trying to remember what watching movies in a movie theater was like.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm sure we could have like a whole show just like on that debate.
Right.
But I don't know. I think at a film festival environment where it's like you're there to celebrate the art and sort of experience it together, booing like that is just, even if you have negative feelings about this whole thing, I don't know. I think that's just not a great response there. And the crowd mentality, right? If one person starts booing, everyone's got to jump on the bandwagon. Boo. Right. Yeah, exactly. So, whatever. All right. Jim, what have you got this week?
I've got some news, and you guys have heard me say in the past about how some actors, for some reason, develop a very negative reaction from a lot of movie fans. You mention their name, and people sometimes, have a reaction like, "Oh, I won't even see a movie that person is in." One of those names. What? Yeah. One of those names is Adam Sandler, right? If we've got to become synonymous with some pretty shitty movies that speaking of Netflix and, Amazon and what else, some of their original content, he's got some kind of big contract going with one of them to create a whole string of like rather dumb, crass, some people might say shitty comedy movies. I haven't seen them, so I can't really pass judgment on them. But again, some more news out of the Cannes Film Festival. Adam Sandler is getting like rave reviews for his role, his performance in the new Noah Baumbach movie, which is called the Meyerowitz Stories, New and Selected. It's a horrible title, but that's what they got. We know Noah Baumbach from Frances Ha. And kind of these quirky little indie slice of life movies. But yeah, Adam Sandler is really getting a lot of attention for his role here. And he stars with like Ben Stiller, Dustin Hoffman is in this movie. I'm excited to see this movie. I've said all along that I think you got to give these actors a chance to get into the right role. And because I think he just kind of tends to get pigeonholed into that like chalkboard comedy style that we've gotten tired of. But I think the guy has acting talent, and I've said this all along. I mean, if you remember Punch Drunk Love, that was a movie I really loved. A lot of people really love. He's got the chops, kind of pushed and coerced into the right roles and the right situations. And so there you have it. I don't know if you guys heard anything about this. Will, you may have, I'm sure.
I have, because this is the when I was mentioning the two Netflix films that were taken to Cannes. The one was the Okja film. The other one was this Noah Baumbach, Adam Sandler film, the Meyerowitz Stories. Meyerowitz. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm so sorry. I'm kind of with you. I want to preface this by saying that 99% of Adam Sandler movies are shitty. He is not someone who I look forward to going and maybe 99 isn't the correct percentage. Maybe it's like 95, but the lion's share of them are really bad and follow the exact same thing, with him doing his infantile voice as infantile people do infantile things around him. That's not a thing that works for me. However, he's not a character or an actor who I think is all entirely bad, because you're right. He did have Punch Drunk Love, which I hold as like probably, gun to my head, that's a top 10 movie all time for me. Like, it's one that I can go back to again and again and again and enjoy. He was also in the I would say underrated Funny People from a few years back, and he's had a few other dramatic films that didn't quite go over as well, like I think The Cobbler was one, and then there was another one, the fire one that I didn't watch, Reign Over Me. I want to see this movie. I really want to see this movie. I like Adam Sandler in a dramatic role. I like it when he can stretch outside of that role, that kind of stereotype role that I dislike so much for him. And I'm a Noah Baumbach fan. Like, I like the stuff that he writes and creates. Films like Mistress America, Francis Ha, like these are films that, I can't get enough of championing, the ones that have just come out in the last few years. So I want to see this movie. And good news, it's getting released through Netflix, so I know when and where I'll be able to watch it.
Boo, right. Netflix.
Boo.
I think I see a face hugger behind you, Brad.
Oh, yeah, there's totally a face hugger behind me, but only if you rub her belly for too long.
Furry face hugger.
Yeah. That is, of course, Nerys, who does not want to appear on camera. She's a little shy in her 12th year of age. She's an old lady. She earns a reprieve from me picking her up and stuffing her in front of the camera. But no worries, guys. My face is safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's Will. Just one more thing to add there. Like, and we've said this before too. Like, we love, one of the things that draws me to movies and that I love about movies is being surprised. And this sets up a perfect surprise. You've got an actor who you don't expect really anything from, that might like blow your mind when he pulls this performance out of nowhere. And that's what makes us love movies. And so I don't know, that to me, that's the magic of it.
I always want to have a good experience at the movies. That said, like, it does take something like this. At this point, Adam Sandler's earned enough of like a negative taste in my mouth that it takes news like this to get me to commit to watching one of his movies. Like, I don't think it's entirely unfair for someone to say, I don't ever want to see another Sandler movie again, because I feel that he's taken enough bad roles to warrant someone like, being burned enough times. That said, when I hear news that something is being this well received, it does make me sort of override that rule for myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm coming from too. Like, I've never been an Adam Sandler fan, really. And Will, you mentioned that 99% of his movies are bad. I would say, 99% of his movies are bad for me. I know there's a lot of people out there who enjoy them, so I'm not gonna. I'm not going to write off all of his movies, but I would say, most of them just haven't worked for me. So when Jim was like, hey, we should watch this movie called Punch Drunk Love with Adam Sandler, I'm like, you're fucking kidding me, right, Jim? You're going to make me watch an Adam fucking Sandler movie? And I ended up really, really liking the movie a lot. So I'm willing to give this film a chance. Would love to see this maybe kind of blow me away. I'm really sorry. This cat is being super aggressive and it's very distracting. Come on, Reese. Yeah, come on. Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to give it a chance, see what he can do. Maybe if this one's really good, this will like see him 10 years from now being like a super well-known dramatic actor instead of infantileness of infinity.
Think about a guy like Jim Carrey in his career, and granted, his was, I think he got there much more quickly than Adam Sandler did, but the first few Jim Carrey films were goofball comedies with him talking out of his ass, literally. And shortly thereafter, he started taking on the occasional, like, slightly more artsy movie or slightly more weighty movie. And now when we think of Jim Carrey, like, I don't think any of us thinks of like, oh, he's that really awful talks out of his butt guy. We're like, oh, that's that quirky guy who sometimes turns in really solid performances. Adam Sandler could be that guy. He just has to say no to a lot more of the films that he says yes to.
Right. Yep. Definitely a good point for sure. Well, we'll see how it shakes out.
Instead of all of them, like Jim Carrey apparently has.
Well,
I think he's pretty much told everybody no at this point. I don't think we've seen him in a movie in a long time.
He's in The Bad Batch, which is just came off of the festival circuit. It's the next film from the director of A Girl Walks at Home at Night Alone. So he's in that, but it's not a huge role.
Yeah.
All right. Well, last bit of movie news for us this week is actually a bit of sad news on one hand, interesting news on another. Zack Snyder's daughter, unfortunately, sad to hear, she actually committed suicide back in March. We found out recently, and I guess Zack Snyder, of course, knee deep in Justice League, has been trying to complete the film. He was interviewed and said he tried to kind of throw himself into the work, hoping it would help him to kind of cope and get through it, but it hasn't. And so he's announced that he's stepping away from Justice League to understandably be with his family and grieve. And Joss Whedon is coming in to finish up the film. So a couple things on that. One, the film is mostly done at this point. A lot of it's in post-production and editing. There were a couple of reshoots, I guess, and then a few new scenes that Zack Snyder wanted. So they've got folks coming back to shoot those. So Joss will be, directing and writing and handling all that stuff. But interesting to note, Joss has been, of course, shackled with having to maintain sort of the color palette and the theme and the grit and the tone, of course, set by Zack Snyder. So I'm wondering, from your guys' perspective, do you think that Joss coming in like this is going to have a marginal impact, a very measurable one? What's your thought? I
think for me, the thing that first of all, I want to say that this is absolutely not good news. It's my heart absolutely goes out to Zack Snyder and his family. Suicide is not the type of thing that anyone expects or to have to deal with, especially with one's own child, while you're in the midst of a huge project. So this is just absolutely brutal news to hear about. The one thing that I'm kind of most worried about with this whole thing is I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking that comes from it. And I think that's going to be, at least for me personally, fairly distasteful. I think if the movie is really good, we're going to hear a lot of well, it was because Joss Whedon swept in and fixed things. If the movie is not very good, we're going to hear, oh, it's because of all of the reshoots, because Joss Whedon had to kind of pick up the pieces, or it was because of this, and
right.
I've, as a filmmaker, I've had some Snyder films that I've absolutely loved, and I've had some films that I've absolutely not. And I wanted to be able to watch this without that kind of, to be able to go into this one pure. I can't at this point. At this point, the genie is out of the bottle with all of this, the news and the way it's going to be received once the film comes out. So it's just an ugly situation all around.
Yeah, I hadn't even heard this news actually until you brought it up, Brad. So that is really sad. You can imagine how much time and effort that Mr. Snyder was putting into the movie stuff, and to have this much of a personal tragedy happen is unbelievable. So, but unfortunately, in some cases, life does happen, and there's a lot of talented people around movies like this, circling around movies like this, whether it's Zack Snyder or Joss Whedon or whoever the producers are, and I'm positive that the movie will recover. But like you said, Will, no matter how the movie turns out, whether it be, if the movie's well received, it'll be, some credit will go to some other guy, right? The guy who steps in. Or if the people don't like the movie, they may blame it on, Snyder, or they may blame it on the new guy coming in, or it's choppy. It feels like it doesn't have a voice. So, yeah, you never know. It's all going to depend on how the movie turns out. It's just a tragedy that it happened to somebody that's, in the limelight.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because obviously this is a terrible tragedy for Zack Snyder and his family. It's been interesting to me just on Facebook today, because Facebook is the perfect barometer of how people are in the real world. I saw someone commenting on this news today that said, Zack Snyder didn't really, Zack Snyder probably didn't really voluntarily step away, that the studio probably made him do it. And then a whole bunch of people were just jumping on and saying, Ding Dong, the witch is dead. Can't wait to have a Joss Whedon Justice League movie. Yeah, it was brutal, man. Like, it was terrible. Like, people I know, I could not believe people were saying some of the things that they were saying.
Will, are you really surprised?
On Facebook a little bit, because I when I think about the different social platforms, I feel like Twitter, because of its brevity, also allows for a lot more snark and a lot more like nastiness, because people don't have time to explain out the gray area of their statements. So when I hear things like that on Facebook, maybe I'm just naive. It's still like, one, takes me by surprise, and two, like gets under my skin.
I mean, I've not been a fan of the Zack Snyder movies, but I'm not like cheering that his tragedy has taken him away from the film. You know what I'm saying? I'm interested to see maybe what's going to happen as a result of Joss Whedon coming in. But I don't know. I just think that's a step too far. Real quick, so in the chat, CRS42066 says, I hope he puts his Whedonism on Justice League for sure. With the little bit left that needs to be done, is there room for Whedonism in this movie?
At this point, I mean, I don't know. I would imagine that, I mean, this film's coming out fairly soon, and from everything that I've read on the news, like, this film is almost done. We're just kind of wrapping a few things. So I don't know that there's enough room, honestly, for Whedon to do much more than just what, like, a second unit director or something like that might be able to do, which is just sort of like kind of fill in a few gaps. So I think that because it has the name Whedon attached, and because Whedon has the following, and because he has the ability to be a story/showrunner type guy, I think all of those things are going to put certain expectations on what he can bring to the film. But where it's at right now, really, it's probably just kind of sewing up a few things that Snyder had already done. Plus, I also would like to say that I think Whedon's enough of a professional that, based on this kind of the situation and how everything went down, I don't think he would come in and just sort of like disrupt the apple cart and like, oh man, I'm here, time to make some changes. Like, if anything, I imagine he's going to be fairly faithful to what Snyder had expected, probably even more so than he might have been kind of not outside of the situation.
Yeah. When does that film open?
November 17th.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're just finishing up technical stuff on the movie at this point, I'm sure.
Well, they are shooting some new scenes that have yet to be written. They're being written right now.
Oh God. Yeah.
So,
regardless of who's in charge, would be worrisome on a movie. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. November seems very far away, but then again, May seemed very far away, like in January, and now suddenly May's almost over. So, it'll go quick. We'll know soon. Hey, so we're like half an hour into the show, and we haven't even started talking about our headliner film.
We had some great movie news, though. This was fun, but yeah, I feel like
happens a lot, huh?
I feel like this thing's about to burst out of us.
Oh, you just preempted my chest burster too.
Oh, you were gonna make a chest burster too?
I was gonna talk about how like the movie news bits like get under our skin and like grow and then just burst out of us uncontrollably, but that's all right.
You can use both.
Like, you can have it.
Yeah, release 2 versions of the episode simultaneously, one with each of our segues. Like, that way we've got options. Like, someone downloads a random one, like, they'll never know.
I'm comfortable enough without having to go through all that. That's fine. All right. So because I know for a fact we have a few people who are new to the show that are watching for the very first time. A, welcome, new folks. Glad to have you here. B, welcome to those who are not new. Glad to have you here, of course, as well. But B, we're going to talk about Alien Covenant, spoiler-free, for probably 15 minutes or so. We'll give you sort of our initial impressions, whether we think it's worth checking out. Did we like it? Did we not like it? I don't know if you care. You've probably already seen it if you're watching the show anyway. But then we'll give you a fair warning before we delve deeply into spoilers. So not to fear, you don't have to jump away right now. We'll give you a heads up before we open that can of spoilers. You guys ready to do this? Are we good?
Ready.
Let's do it.
All right. Then here we go. Our discussion of Alien Covenant. All right. So, Jim, why don't you give us a little bit of setup for this film, as well as your initial impressions as we're seeing in theaters, wait for rental, skip. What do you think?
So, Alien Covenant. I don't know which number movie this is in the Alien verse, but this is probably the third movie directed by Ridley Scott in the Alien verse. I know he directed Alien. Obviously, he directed Prometheus, and now he's directed Alien Covenant. I'm just going to read the synopsis. I'll give you my impressions of the movie, and then we'll get into our discussion. So here we go. Bound for a remote planet on the far side of the galaxy, members of the colony ship Covenant discover what they think to be an uncharted paradise. Once there, the mysterious world soon turns dark and dangerous, forcing the crew into a deadly fight for survival. And so that's the least spoilery description that I could come up with. I tried to go with the wiki one, but it was loaded with spoilers, which I didn't want to get into. This movie is kind of easy to spoil if you're not, if you're trying to stay dark until you see the movie. But this one stars Michael Fassbender, Billy Crudup, who I liked seeing in this movie, Danny McBride. It also stars Guy Ritchie in actually an uncredited role in this movie. You can't say we might. Let me see this one. Let me see. James Franco makes an appearance in this movie, and so anyway, this movie's got pretty good cast. It's got Ridley Scott at the helm. I'm going to say right up front, I like this movie. I liked it more than I was expecting to like it. I had seen that. I think people are going to be polarized on this movie pretty harshly, and I think that's because this movie is trying to serve two audiences, and that's where I think the movie really struggles. And even in this movie, you have the Alien, the original Alien movie, Aliens, maybe even Alien 3, which are kind of one kind of movie, and then you kind of have the movie that started with a story that started with Prometheus, which is a much different story and tone than those movies were. And I think this movie tries to walk the line in between them and kind of stitch them together. And I think people's response to this movie, it depends on how well they think for their for their sensibilities, how well that happened. For me, it was fine. To be honest, I'm kind of digging the Prometheus elements of the story way more than I'm appreciating kind of the old school Alien stuff that they're trying to bring into this movie. And it felt a little patched in. I don't think it was fully successful in what it tried to do in melding the two together. It definitely felt like two movies kind of laid on top of each other a little bit, and they were at odds. But in the end, I liked it, mostly for the Prometheus stuff that's in here and kind of the creationism, world-building thing that they're doing here, the continuation of the Prometheus story. I enjoyed this one. We saw it in a big screen, big theater. I thought it looked great. And it surprised me in some places. I was interested in some of the characters, not a lot of the characters. There's a lot of characters in this movie that I think are kind of throwaway characters, a lot of throwaway characters. But the main characters in the story, I kind of really dug. So this is a must watch for any fan of the Alien series. For me, I liked it. I know others are probably not going to like it, and I can't wait to hear what you guys thought.
All right. So we've got a big recommend so far. Let me ask you guys this before I go into my thoughts. There is an alien in Alien Covenant that doesn't immediately stand out as obvious. Do you know what alien we're talking about?
An alien in Alien Covenant does not immediately stand out as obvious. I guess not. No. What you got?
So James Franco played Alien.
Yes.
And is in this movie.
Oh snap.
I finally pull out like an erudite movie joke reference to bust on you guys, and you didn't get it. Okay, that's all right. I was really surprised to see James Franco in this movie, actually, because I had heard that like there was some kind of Alien Covenant like prequel thing happening a long time ago, and then I never heard about it again. And I guess like a 5-minute like film premiered during Legion that was like a precursor to this film. And James Franco is like the captain of the ship, and it's like this like Last Supper thing. So I actually went back and watched that today, and I was like, oh, James Franco. Okay, gotcha. All right. And we'll talk a little bit more about Franco when we get to spoilers, probably. But I was just very sort of taken aback to see him. That said, I did enjoy his participation in Alien Covenant. James Franco is not my favorite actor. We talked about that. Was it last week? I think a little bit.
He's another
one. It was last week.
Yeah. So, but I have to say, like going into this movie, especially after having just watched Prometheus again, I think Prometheus should be renamed Ponderous. I like Prometheus. I think it's a decent film. I just think it's just very heavy-handed and very thinky, which isn't a bad thing. But going into Alien Covenant, I'm kind of like, okay. So it's Ridley Scott, and I'm sure he wants to continue the Prometheus stuff that he started, but obviously now we're blending in a lot of the alien and more actiony and like horror elements to it. So I was a little bit afraid that it was going to be like this like weird train wreck of like two different like tonal things. But I actually think the balance was struck pretty well here. In fact, I found myself glad to see a lot of the follow-up to the groundwork that was laid in Prometheus. So that definitely was a big win for me. I think from a special effects standpoint, this movie's fantastic. It looked like there was kind of a mix between like practical effects and like CGI, which was nice. Everything is such a fucking CGI fest these days. You know, when moments of like body horror and stuff happen, it's nice to see that it's not all just like, you know, digital construction. Man, great job by Michael Fassbender here, pulling double duty as both David and Walter. Danny McBride, who I really have not liked Danny McBride in much. He was kind of fun in This Is the End, but I actually really liked him as Tennessee here, which really kind of surprised me. I was like, really? I like Danny McBride now? I don't know how to reconcile this in my head, you guys. But definitely a good cast. We've got poor man's Demi Moore coming up in this film. We'll talk more about her as well. Billy Crudup, it was interesting to see here. But this is a big recommend for me. I would say, you know, if you really enjoyed the first couple of movies in the Alien franchise, I tend to forget that like the later movies and the Alien versus Predator movies ever happened. And I forget that on purpose. But if you liked Alien and Aliens and Prometheus, I think this movie is a huge, huge win for you. Will, what about you? Where do you come down?
So I come down much lower than the two of you. I'll start off by saying this is not a bad movie, but it also falls in the not a good movie category for me either. This is an extremely flawed movie with a few good elements. Those elements are worth watching in and of themselves. It's stitched together extremely poorly for my tastes. So let me start with what I did like. This movie carries the very, very high concept stuff from Prometheus 2 to the next stage of its to the next stage of its evolution. Yes, that's what I was going to go for. And I'm one of those people who I feel like kind of my views on this movie are very similar to Prometheus, in that I love its ideas more than I love the way that it told those ideas. Here, the horror of this film is not like that of an Alien film. In fact, I think the best way to enjoy this film is to not look at it as an Alien film, but instead to look at it as a more horror-driven Prometheus film. You can almost look at them as two separate franchises which share an alien race, and I think you're going to have a better time. Fassbender is amazing here. Fassbender is really, really good, and I think without him, this film doesn't work at all. Mm-hmm. I also think that we've got some good performances from some of the other cast members here. I did like Catherine Watterson as Daniels. I think she was She played the kind of the tough as nails, kind of sensible lead, the way this franchise needs. I liked Billy Crudup. I like Danny McBride here. I think everyone did a pretty good job. What I didn't like was a lot of the writing for these characters. This is just like Prometheus. This is a film about smart people doing stupid things. Like most of the things that happen in this film just come from people making really awful mistakes that are really hard, at least for me, to kind of justify in the moment. So each decision the characters made, I was kind of like, well, that didn't make any sense. That didn't make any sense. And then it goes all the way through to the end. So that's hard for me, especially if it was just a dumb horror movie, you can get away with having characters just do kind of the stupid, like, I'm running upstairs and locking myself instead of like calling the cops thing, because it's not a smart movie. But this movie tries to be really intelligent. So when the characters do dumb things, it stands out even more. I guess what did work in addition to all of that, I did like that the horror of this got away from the isolation of space, which you get from Alien films, and gets away from the rape allegory stuff, which is part of the xenomorph drama stuff from Aliens. Instead, this focuses on a much more esoteric horror, kind of like the horror of creation versus the horror of destruction, which you find in the Alien movies. This film's about the horror of creation, and it's really, really cool that they go that route. I just hated the way they went about it, and I hate the way the third act pulled off some of its story choices. Right there in the middle, I think there was some stuff I really liked. It took too long to get up to speed for me, and then it petered out really quickly towards the end. So I did not hate this movie. Those good elements I said are totally worth watching, but I really wish this were a better movie. I wish this is one I could be like singing from the rooftops for people to go see. And instead, it's one that I'm glad that I saw it, but I'm also probably never going to see this movie again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to address, the horrible decision-making thing. I know this is I think everybody that's talked about this movie has mentioned this. But you go back to the very first Alien movie, there were a ton of horrible decisions made in that movie as well. And I think these horrible decisions or dumb decisions, whatever you want, or they're part of horror. They create tension between the film and the audience, because the audience knows that something bad is going to happen as soon as that decision is made. That happens in every single horror movie. So if you're going to create tension, you almost have to have people doing stupid stuff. And again, like I said, it goes back to the first movie. There's nothing different about this movie. As a matter of fact, there's one blatant scene that we can talk about in spoilers where
there's 2,000 things that are different, I think.
Different?
Yeah, this is a film about people transporting like 2,000 colonists. And so versus the poor decisions that they make are much more pronounced, because they're basically jeopardizing the lives of everyone in the back of the ship every time they make dumb decisions. For me, that's what stood out as even more pronounced than other franchises, when it's just, 8 cargo people trying to figure out how to deal with this thing they came across. Even if they don't make the right decisions, they're not just like completely gambling with the 2,000 lives, which really don't account to anything in this film. Like I think that's where it was a big problem for me. Like,
yeah, I think it's hard to talk around some of this because of the spoiler angle. There are elements to that decision, sort of both ways, that I don't know. I can see it from both sides. So maybe what we do is we table sort of that decision until we get to spoilers, so we can talk about it more freely, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. But yeah, the world building part and expanding the Prometheus thing. So obviously, right, Alien started as a simple horror movie in space. I don't believe, and I maybe I need to read more about this. I don't believe necessarily that Ridley Scott had this idea of creationism, and I think that was maybe built on kind of this world kind of built out after he thought like, oh, we got this alien thing. let's kind of build out its world and see where we can go with it. And I don't think it was written out this way from the beginning, and that's pretty obvious. They added some things in this movie effects wise. I want to talk about that when we get into spoilers that seemed that were off to me. I didn't appreciate them. A lot of the stuff that happens with the alien xenomorphs, we know, I mean, we could see that coming a mile away, right? Because the same things kind of happen over and over again. But like I said, in general, I think, like dumb decisions of the crew. I mean, we'll talk about one big one. We'll talk about two big ones. One which, you scratch your head and say, in that position, what would I do? Like, I don't know which way I would go. I know that they're probably going to make the wrong decision because otherwise we wouldn't have a movie, but I don't know if I'd make the right decision in that situation either. So that's a good way to put it on screen. Same thing with several other decisions. And you're right, Brad. We'll get to those in spoilers.
I'm thinking now is probably a pretty good time to go ahead and segue. I think most people who are hanging out with us right now, watching or listening, have probably seen the film anyway. So kind of continuing to dance around it may not necessarily make sense. So let's go ahead and move on to spoilers for anyone who is watching or listening right now. If you're watching live, feel free to step away for 20 minutes or so. Come on back for plugs, but spoilers are officially fair game. If you're listening via digital audio through iTunes, Stitcher, or on our website, use that handy-dandy show index Jim lovingly creates for you to skip ahead as needed. So I've stalled enough. So I think the big decision to kind of talk about, just to start us off, Will, I think this is kind of going back to what you were pointing to as well as Jim. The ship basically deploys its like solar recharge sails. There's a big like burst of radiation energy. They get damaged. The primary crew gets woken up. And they have to decide, do they go investigate this Country Roads Take Me Home distress call from Shaw, who they don't know necessarily it's that yet, or do they continue on to their destination to safely deliver all the colonists in suspension and the embryos? Is that correct? Did I hit that nail on the head?
I think that's the first big hurdle, yeah.
Yeah,
gotcha.
And so you have this situation where the captain, the other thing you have to mention is Franco, who really was in this movie very little, did not have a speaking part in the movie per se, but the captain of the ship who's guiding this colonization mission is gone in the first few minutes of the film. So they're kind of cut off at the head, and they've got this guy who's the next in line, who's a little bit reluctant, not quite sure of himself, is a quote a man of faith, but we don't know much more about that. And he's put in a position of like, hey, we found this beacon, this planet we never saw before appears. It's got perfect conditions for life. We could colonize here, or we could hop back in those shitty fucking isolation pods for another 7 years and carry out the mission. What do we do? And that's the one I was like, geez, I don't know what I would do in that situation. Like, would you push your foot down? Yeah, what?
Is that fear about the pods coming from having like a couple of people who died in them when they malfunctioned? Or where do you think that's
coming from? Right from the movie? It was mentioned right in the movie. I mean, they're like, I'm not sure we want to get in those pods again. We want to get on with this colonization mission. So there was pressure from the crew as well against the captain, who was, not quite authoritative, I'll say. So, I mean, we could say that was basically the first dumb decision of the movie. But I don't know how you can say that that's just a dumb decision. Fuck this movie. It's a piece of garbage because we're making dumb decisions already. And I'm not putting words in your mouth, Will. I'm talking about what I've heard from other people. Because I think that's a really good way to put tension in the movie. Like, geez, which way would you go? I don't think it was cut and dry at that point in the movie. And as an audience, we know shit's going to go bad because he made that decision.
Right.
Well, even putting that aside, like, I think my problem with it was I think the script wanted us to think that the dilemma was more compelling than it was. And I think that that's something they could have tightened up a little bit more at that point. I mean, these are people, they have this throwaway line. These are highly trained scientists who spent a lot of time researching this exact mission. And in a couple minutes of screen time are just like, yeah, fuck it, let's go over here instead. That's not very compelling at all in terms of like, in terms of why they made that decision. Maybe instead, if they could have really written this into a much better place for me if there was some sort of problem with the ship and they thought it may not make it there, so let's try this other option instead. But really, it was just sort of a, oh man, that thing was kind of tense. Let's just try this other thing instead. Especially when that other thing was weird and mysterious, and nobody seemed to really question that too much, except for the one character who's meant to question it, and nobody listens to her. Like, this thing is playing a John Denver song, and broadcasting that, and everyone's like, yeah, this weird place that humanity has never been to before, that humanity might be able to colonize on, is broadcasting a John Denver song. That's pretty weird, right? No, they don't seem to really question kind of these things.
I think the other component of this is that the primary crew is made of couples, and the captain just died, and his now widow, is part of the command structure of this ship. And, it's kind of like, I don't know, trying to put myself in their shoes. If I could potentially go to a planet now and my husband is still alive, would I do that? Or maybe we go back in the pods and one or both of us end up dead. Like, do I maybe face a life without him, or keep him alive now and go investigate this other thing? I don't think it's a clear-cut situation. I don't think it's an easy decision to make. And I agree, maybe they could have set it up a little bit differently in terms of like, the architecture of the problem. But I think in this situation, I don't know. It kind of worked for me. I see where you're coming from, Will, but I don't know. I think it was fine.
Yeah. And different people are going to have different takeaways. For me, this was the first of, there were about 3 or 4 just kind of like what I consider to be just, I can't relate to these people as like intelligent thinkers, because they keep making, just to me, like kind of non-intelligent move after move. And it's the script's fault. The script doesn't do a really good job of portraying the intelligence of these characters. They're fodder. They're only here to be fodder. And that's okay in a horror movie. But when you're trying to deal with like really lofty concepts, when you're trying to make an intelligent movie, I need more intelligence from my scripts.
So let me ask you a question, Will. Have you ever like been with people as a disaster is happening? Have you ever like experienced firsthand how they react in those situations?
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, just random people, not necessarily like cops or firefighters, I mean, these people are like scientists and whatever. I mean, do they always in like a disaster think rationally and super intelligently as like the place is burning down around them, or really bad shit is happening?
Well, see, if that was the case, that's the way they should have written the movie. This decision happened post-crisis, after everyone's had a chance to calm down. If the decision was being made while the shit was hitting the fan, I would have been able to be right there with you on that journey. I would have said, yeah, I get it. Like, stresses were high and they made this maneuver. Instead, what we've got is, and again, the other side of this is, these are characters who they've planned for, I think they said for years. They've planned for years to do this particular mission. We come in and we join their story right after a particular thing happens. So we only have that basis of knowledge. We don't have the basis of having spent 10 years researching what it's like to be in these pods and what this journey is going to happen. So I think that I don't know that at least for me, that doesn't count. That doesn't really become like an apples to apples.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Well, I think, looking at the chat here as well, a couple of folks are weighing in sort of on this this questionable decision as well. And sort of the exploration and duty piece of that comes in as well, right? Their mission from the Wayland Corporation. Crudup even says at one point, because they've gotten this message, it's kind of their duty to investigate. So, you kind of got like 3 different things going on, and it's not an easy decision. And I think that's probably why, we're continuing to talk at it from different angles, but maybe we just need to kind of like agree to disagree on that. And,
I think so.
Yeah. Other.
I think for me, I think the movie made its point to me that was a hard decision, not just a dumb decision. It ended up being the wrong one, and they even admitted it later on. Like, you were right. Coming to this planet wasn't the right thing to do. One of the characters said that right at the point, and the movie recognized it. But for me, that decision was a hard one at that moment if I put myself in that situation.
There's other places where the script could have probably fixed that too. Like you mentioned like a bunch of the characters at some point mentioned that the Billy Crudup character is a character of faith, even though we never see anything of that.
Right.
If we had seen maybe that playing more of a role in his decision to make this, I think that would have also helped me a lot too. My problem with it is not necessarily that it was a dumb decision. It was one that just there were so many opportunities that I see sitting right there on the table for them to shore that up, and the fact that they didn't was what was disappointing.
Yeah, it's definitely understandable. We've got our time quickly slipping away from us, and there's a lot left to talk about. So let's go ahead. We're going to move forward from that questionable decision. Sorry to quell the conversation, but I know there's a lot of other stuff we want to get to. So Jim, you mentioned some like effects things didn't quite work for you. Is that right?
Yeah, so for some reason, and I have not seen all of the movies with Alien in it, but I couldn't remember a movie before in this franchise having alien vision. Like there were moments towards the end of the movie where now all of a sudden the camera has to take you to the viewpoint of the alien. I thought that was, for me anyway, it kind of took me out of the movie. It took me out of those scenes, and I'm like, they didn't have to do that. That's, first of all, anybody can throw Vaseline on a lens and like jerk the camera around, and it really didn't add anything to those scenes. And it's a little thing, it's a nitpick, but I'm scratching my head like, if they had done this all along, maybe I would have bought it, but in any of the movies, but all of a sudden he inserts it in 2 scenes here for no real positive to me. I don't know, it was weird.
It disrupts tension, like, because a lot of the Alien movies, I mean, one of the things that's most effective from Alien as a horror film is the fact that you don't quite know where in the ship these things are at. And so when you switch to the alien's POV, I feel like it sort of diminishes that. It wasn't like a deal killer to me, but I'm right there with you. Like, if I had my druthers, I'd cut those scenes.
So Sam from Denver is reminding us that in Alien 3, we had like the alien vision happening quite a bit, and they did it much better in his opinion in Alien 3.
Yeah.
So it's something that's been done before, but I agree. I think bringing it in here just really pulled me out, because it's not even like it was done consistently, like from the beginning, right? It's just all of a sudden we have a random alien vision moment, and I'm like, wait a second. Where is this POV coming from? Like, what is this? And then you see like the creepy crawly, like distortion-y things going on. And I'm like, oh, okay. We're looking through the alien creature's eyes at this point. But it was jarring. I found myself like trying to figure that out instead of paying attention to what was actually going on in the film. So Jim, right there with you, that did not work for me either.
The scene that the scenes that I thought were stand out to me was there's a beginning scene, kind of a prologue scene that was David's origin story, basically, with his creator, Wayland. I thought was fantastic. That was a great setup for his storyline. I love the interplay between Guy Ritchie and Michael Fassbender in that scene. I also love the scene of David, and this is a big spoiler, releasing the goo on the engineer's planet there as they were kind of gathering to see the ship that's arriving. He just like lays it out there, total destruction. And that scene was pretty powerful.
Go for it, Brad.
I was just going to agree. I mean, it's interesting because David, tells the group, we crash landed on this world. You know what I mean? We accidentally released the goop, whatever. And then come to find out, no, this is actually David, like wreaking total genocide, on the people that supposedly, created the human race and life in space. So I really liked some of the callbacks to like Pompeii. I recently watched the Doctor Who Pompeii episode.
Did you think that would come up in this movie?
I didn't. I totally didn't. So I'm like, that looks a lot like Pompeii. What's going on there? So, it was interesting.
That was I would say one of the standout scenes of the film. This is the stuff that I liked best in the movie was when it got to explore like the, what I called the Planet of Dr. Moreau stuff, like the stuff where David got to be sort of like both a Pied Piper and a mad scientist. Like those are the types of scenes that I thought Fassbender did an amazing job of, and they created more tension. In fact, when the aliens came up, they were actually less scary than the threat of the stuff that David was doing. And I almost feel like you could have cut a lot of the xenomorph stuff out of this film, and maybe it's been a little cleaner. In fact, the only stuff I didn't enjoy with David whatsoever really happened towards the end of the movie, and this is sort of the film's albatross for me. Like if the stuff I've said before, the character's not doing the intelligence stuff, like that's not deal killer stuff. That's like wish list stuff. The thing that was a deal killer to me was we're in spoilers now. The whole section towards the end of the film where David and Walter have a almost Yoda-esque like giant like robot ninja fight, followed by the evil twin. Which one is it really? Which we all knew how that was going to end. And when the twist is revealed as a twist, they didn't they tried to do it as oh my God, I can't believe this thing happened. It was so obvious that it was going to happen that it was almost laughable at that point. I felt like that was a completely missed opportunity. I would have preferred if we had just seen David kill Walter, take his place, and then just play that scene more straightforward.
So I gotta tell you, I love that you brought this up, Will, because I'm a big Star Trek fan, and Darren and Walt, who we saw this movie with over the weekend, were also big Star Trek fans. So a few things stood out here. One, the whole plot thing with David and Walter basically is the episode Data Lore from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Like, Data, the android, has an evil android brother. They look completely alike. They talk similar, blah, blah, blah. And Lore teaches Data how to be more human and his creative side and all this other stuff. And then Lore ends up taking Data's place and trying to fool the crew, and then tries to kill everybody. So as I'm watching this movie, I'm saw that. Was this a direct influence on the storyline? I don't know. But other movies have done that too. Twin movies, you have an evil twin or whatever. So
which one do I shoot? Which one do I shoot?
Right. Exactly. Or they use technology, to make it happen. Yeah. But at least the film, I don't know, the film almost hurts itself in a way, because it lays breadcrumbs for you to figure out that David is pretending to be Walter. But in leaving those breadcrumbs, I think it steals the strength of that moment away. There's certain things, right? We know from the robot ninja fight, right, that when Walter gets stuck through the skin and bleeds, he apparently can Logan heal, right? But yet David gets back to the ship and they're putting the space band-aids on his face, and his skin isn't healing, right? So immediately I'm oh yeah, of course that's David, because we know Walter can heal. So I find myself trying to figure out, does the crew know that Walter has that ability to heal? Because if so, would they then have reason to suspect? They mentioned doing maintenance on David and Mother earlier in the movie, so I assume they probably have access to specifications. So maybe you chalk it up to they're in a crisis, things are blowing up around them, they're just not thinking about it. To what I was talking about earlier, I don't know, but I just think it does too good of a job at sort of heading that surprise off at the pass.
Yeah, and I picked up on it right away. Not to put aside the fact that we know just by plot that that's going to happen, right? Because there was a smash cut during the fight where it was David goes to punch, Walter goes to punch David, and David's grabbing for a knife at the same time, and boom, there's a smash cut to a totally different scene. Next thing you know, we see in the other one's clothes come out. That's never been done before. But not only that, but he didn't even try to disguise the accent. That was the weird part. David actually used David's accent instead of Walter's, which I'm wouldn't they? I picked that up in 5 seconds. I don't know why they didn't.
That's for example 3 or 4 of just the characters not being very intelligent. For me, they should have been to her credit, Daniel's once looked down at his hand and was like, okay, that's very obviously him. But I mean, I guess if it were me, and I think if this were a lot of people, if only one of the two identical robot clones, one of which is my friend and one of which has been trying to murder me, and they look identical, gets on board the ship, I think any reasonable person would be like, yeah, we should probably check this dude out. Like, we should probably just like
we
make
know there's
sure
two
it's
of
the
them.
right one. Wait. Let's listen to his voice.
We know there's two of them.
Yeah.
We've seen and heard both of them. But I mean, there were some smart decisions. There was one scene with is it called the Neomorph? The one I'm like, oh my God, is this thing going to actually talk to David? Like, I thought,
yeah.
And then the guy, like, he's like, don't shoot it. And then the guy shoots it anyway, which I thought was pretty awesome that he did shoot it. And like, David's like, oh my God, you shot it. I thought that was a great little subversion of dumb expectations.
Followed by, though, then the guy that's like talking to this alien and just sort of like going, like, freaking out that you killed it instead of being obviously like, oh yeah, you should have killed that thing. The guy's like, actually, come over here and put your face in this weird egg. And he does so. Like,
wait, though, wasn't that a different guy? The one that shot the
Yeah.
alien was not Crudup. That was not the captain. That was a different dude on the crew.
was it?
The captain got the face hugger. The captain got the face hugger. It was one of the other guys who shot the alien, I think.
Yeah.
But when it came up behind when David was talking to him, I thought that was Crudup.
Yeah, I could be
Maybe
wrong,
not.
but
I don't know.
I don't think it was. I thought it was a different bearded dude, the one that was smoking the cigar, the security dude from earlier.
The one of the gay couple.
Were they a gay couple?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
all
the guy with the
the-
accent.
Yeah.
The guy with the
Right,
accent.
right, yeah. So my memory may be fuzzy. You guys who are in the chat, feel free to chime in if you remember. But I don't think it was Crudup who did that, because then David like ends up leaving, and then the Crudup thing happens after that. But Will, to your point though, I know, Crudup's character is a man of faith or whatever, but like, David's like, oh yeah, this place is completely safe. And then, oops, dead woman with her head floating in the water. Guess it's not completely safe. So then, Crudup's character is like trusting that when David says, hey, put your face in this like egg with a bio component, that is pretty dumb. So, and that one,
I love the line. I love the line right before it. It's completely
the scene
safe.
itself was cool.
Right.
The scene itself was cool. Like, that was my problem. Like, I loved almost every single individual scene of this film. I just hated the logic that weaved them together. I loved the scene of them coming across the floating head. I loved the scene of him getting face huggered. I didn't like the fact that this man of faith, who is also like trying to lead these like this expedition, didn't immediately go, yeah, gee, I should get back to my crew right now. I just think that, I wanted to see more of that. I wanted to just see more of these characters. Just like, they made it really easy to be killed, like really easy to be killed. And I feel like, again, the movie, I wanted to be smart in that. They had 14, once you get past the captain, you had 14 crew members, and really like 9 of them were just there to kind of like die,
To be
like,
killed.
just for the sake of being fodder. I don't know.
Yeah, that it could have been a smaller crew and we would have been fine, right?
Yeah, smaller crew with kind of less, like some of the deaths were just kind of people kind of doing the like, this weird thing happens, let's fuck in the shower scene. Like, you cut a lot of those characters out entirely. And you cut, because of that, you cut their kind of their goofy deaths out. You have a tenser movie because you get to know the characters a little bit more, and you get to see them interacting with each other a little bit more. I don't know. This movie kind of this movie kind of collapsed in on itself by having so many characters and so many ideas and not doing everything it wanted to do with them.
You're right. Well, I mean, the whole last part, I mean, once the alien was, you knew the alien was on the ship, I mean, you could practically know where it was going. And they put all that in there, I think, because in Prometheus, while it had good ideas, I think people who were expecting aliens were very disappointed with what they got in that movie. And this seemed to me like a reaction by the filmmaker, like, okay, they want xenomorphs attacking crew members and, being blown the fuck out into space. I'm going to give them exactly that. And it felt like he just slapped it in there. And on top of what I think would be a really good movie if that other stuff was expanded. I mean, we mentioned Brad mentioned Pompeii. He mentioned TNG. But has anyone mentioned Blade Runner? I mean, there was a lot of Blade Runner. Of course, Ridley Scott in this movie, especially in the talk between the two. Anytime David was on the screen, kind of in that middle section. And I thought that stuff was fantastic. Even though we've seen a lot of it before in Blade Runner, I thought it was well done here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely agreed. I still want to see, like, if we're gonna get some kind of like official, like I don't know, tie-in of the two movies somehow. Yeah. One of the things I want to talk about just before we wrap and get out of here is sort of the callback to Aliens with like the exoskeleton big machinery fight. So, of course, the xenomorph in this film gets killed by the crane, right? Like they crush it with the crane.
One of them does, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that was like a cool homage? Do you think it made the end weaker for you guys? How did that work for you?
Really quick on me, it worked fine for me because I only saw Aliens once, and it didn't make that much of an impression on me. It's not seared in my brain. So this actually seemed a little fresh, even though I think now I understand it's more Aliens than original. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if my quibble there is I think that all of the stuff in that final climax was a little overdrawn, but I didn't have a problem with like the actual imagery itself. I thought some of it was pretty cool. I thought that, and I think that it's because at that point we get to see the Catherine Waterston character sort of being the driving force, sort of being the the Ripley. And I think she was very effective in that role. So she sold it. I bought it.
So, all right.
Climaxes. Sorry, Brad. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Yeah, it mostly worked for me too. I think we had some setup for that earlier in the movie, right? When there's the tension on the chains has slackened because of the damage, right? They have to winch it back into place. So I'm like, this is gonna come back to be a thing. Like I'm sure, like
check off.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So I thought it was, I don't know. I thought it was interesting, but because we already know that like David has taken Walter's place, in a way for me, it kind of lessened some of the impact for that. Cause it's like, okay, well, they killed the xenomorph. Great. David's going to make like 5,000 more of them with the colonists and all the embryos. So like big deal. You killed this one. Way to go. And then sure enough, like the next thing is them going back into stasis. And then she realizes while she's in the pod going to cryo sleep, that it is David, not Walter.
Oh, and was that a British accent? She's like, I think at that point she's like, oh yeah, maybe he was talking with a British accent.
Or like when the android starts fucking quoting like esoteric poetry at you, like that's a little bit of a giveaway.
This is a little creepy.
Yeah,
we're gonna put you in this isolation room real quick while we just figure out what the hell's happening here. Like, yeah.
So, hey, in the chat, one last thing to talk about before we move on to some plugs and wrap up here. Austin King wants to know if we're excited for the next movie. And so I'm guessing the setup of that would maybe be like a couple different ways. Like one, Fassbender could just be like pulling people out of, suspension a couple at a time and experimenting on them. And then, the next movie picks up after all that. Or like, maybe they go to the planet and he lets all the colonists come back to life and then he uses all of them, you know what I mean? Like makes hundreds and hundreds of xenomorphs. I don't know. Where do you guys think it's going to go?
So I'm, even though I wasn't a huge fan of Covenant, I am excited for what comes next, mainly because even though this franchise has burned me a few times, I feel like I'll always give it another shot. Like even if I'm burned 18 more times, like I love the idea and the core concepts enough that I'll always be there. You know what I'd love to see out of this movie? The next one could be a really small, confined, isolated spaceship versus xenomorph type thing if you sort of take a crib out of the Passenger's Playbook, and you have it basically being like, yeah, just a couple of the passengers on this ship have woken up and shit is happening all around them, and they have to figure it out kind of in real time. Like, I would like to see that, because then these are characters who don't know what's going on. If they make stupid mistakes, it's okay, because they don't have any basis for it. They're just struggling through a situation that they stumbled into blindly. I would like to see that movie. I don't think that's what they're going to make, but that's the one.
I don't know what they're going to make. Put it this way. I don't know if I'm excited for the next movie. I am curious where they're going to go with the story. This whole creation thing. There's still a question in my mind of how the original movie happened, like how the first act of the original movie happened. Like, what was that ship? It was obviously an engineer ship. Did they have another ship? Did they land on another planet? Did they, it doesn't really dovetail together with this movie yet. So,
yeah, because you've got an engineer ship, but with one of David's xenomorph eggs. So right now, a bunch of them. Yeah, there's things that have not, there's things that don't jive lore-wise.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got to get from like point A to point B to point C, right, to set up Alien. So I'm guessing maybe David goes back to the planet from Prometheus that had like all those other ships like there with the goo on them to like get more. Maybe the ship they're on now, the Covenant, gets damaged and he swapped ships. I don't know, but definitely I like that there's some room and some play in the story to give us room for more movies on how we get there. I just hope they don't stretch it out too much. It's cool to reboot this franchise and get it going again. But if we start seeing like a new Alien movie like every 2 years for the next 10 years, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see where it goes.
Indeed. And I see, Jim, I think that was you mentioned in the chat. For a while there, we thought Sigourney Weaver was the voice of Mother, the computer on the ship, but it's credited to someone else.
I mean, that would have been a fine cameo. That'd be cool. Like,
yeah.
It's it's be a fan servicey type thing that doesn't hurt the franchise, and it just makes a couple of people go, "Oh, huh." So then, yeah, I would have been fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right.
A Ripley ancestor.
There you go.
Ripley's mother was the voice of Mother.
Believe it or not. Anyway, all right. Well, that wraps up our Alien Covenant discussion. We're going to go ahead and just wrap up with a couple of quick plugs before we look to wrap for the week. I just wanted to plug the fact that Will is going to be out here in Tucson again this weekend. We got a couple of movies that we can potentially see. So, I'm looking forward to that, definitely. Of the two movies, Will, which one are you most excited for this weekend?
So Pirates of the Caribbean 5 versus Baywatch. I hope this doesn't sound awful, but I think it's Baywatch. Like, I stopped watching the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, so I didn't see 3 and 4. I don't really have any feelings for that franchise. And Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is a guy who he can be hit or miss, but when he hits, he's really funny. So Baywatch could be a train wreck, but it could also be kind of funny. I don't know.
Also, it would be great to say that, we just watched the newly elected president of the United States in a Baywatch movie.
That's right.
That would be awesome, right? Because The Rock is thinking about running for president someday.
I'm so excited to have Will out here and see some movies with him. Well, maybe movies, no, not just one movie, but my pick and my vote would go to Baywatch if I had to pick one of the two.
And so you guys have helped me reveal my plug. So Baywatch is out this weekend. I didn't like the TV show at all, but I do like The Rock. He's a guilty pleasure for me, just like he is for you, Jim. So I'm actually excited to see this movie. It's probably going to be awful. It's probably going to be very stupid. But The Rock, Zac Efron, shirtless for a lot of the movie, I'm okay with that. I think that's cool. We'll
Yeah, on
see.
this last week's episode of RuPaul's Drag Race, they had at every commercial, they had Bob the Drag Queen and Katya, to her two kind of big personalities from previous seasons. They did a Baywatch commercial at each commercial break, and each one was funnier than the last, and that also kind of helped jazz me up. Like, okay,
Nice.
I'm on board.
There you go. Add a little drag in it. Bring it on in. Help spice that up a little bit. Nice. All right. Will, what have you got this week?
I've seen very few movies this week, at least not in terms of ones that I can plug. But one thing that I would like to plug is a television show. But it's a very cinematic television show. Jim's making face. Am I about to plug what you're about to plug?
I don't have a plug, so no.
Oh, okay. You made a face like I was taking yours. I was like,
no,
oh,
I'm anxious to hear.
I just finished season 2 of Master of None, and it remains one of the better television shows that have come out in the last several years. It's Aziz Ansari's show on Netflix. Each season runs like 10-ish episodes, and he's a weird dude. I loved him on Parks and Rec, but I had no idea that when he created the show for Netflix about him as a performer, him as a guy navigating a bunch of like relationship and social issues, that it would be as cinematically and creatively shot as it is. Like, each episode has sort of a different like focus on something going on, whether it be just the personalities of New York City, or he's got a lesbian best friend, and one story shows like every year of their life kind of having Thanksgivings together. There's a season from this episode that's shot in black and white, like an Italian romance film. Yeah, the Thief one. Yeah, and they're such well-made, like they're little mini movies. So I'm all on board with Master of None. Season 2 was absolutely stellar. I need season 3 right now.
All right.
I'm halfway through. Brad's seen some of it with me. I think it's an acquired taste. I think you got to kind of get in the groove of his, comedy tone to really pick up on it. But some of those episodes have been great. Some of them have been okay. And it can't be all fantastic. But yeah, that one you mentioned, the black and white one, was really good.
Oh God.
Yeah, I've only seen a few episodes, and maybe if I started from the beginning, I don't know, it might be different. But the main guy bugs the shit out of me. I hate his voice. I don't find him funny at all. I watch these episodes with Jim, and I don't. The only thing I laugh at is how bad the actors who play the parents are. And Jim, you said you weren't sure if they even were real actors. I don't know.
I know his parents are actually his parents. Like, that was a big thing during season 1. Like they kind of trotted them out for the Emmys, and just like the father was just like, I can't believe I'm here. Like, yeah, like that's his actual parents.
Gotcha.
For me, it's less of a watch for the laughs, although the laughs are there. Like, I've cried. Like, this is a crier for me. Like, there's a couple of these episodes that have just kind of like wrecked me.
I guess I've seen the wrong episodes then, but glad that you enjoy it so much. It's officially getting a season 3, I assume. Is that right? Is that news out?
I don't know if it has been announced or not, but it's going, like, it is getting like critically just like praised left and right. So I think that it's pretty much a lock for one.
Nice.
And they wrote the end of season 2 with the idea of a season 3. So I think that's usually pretty good news.
Well, we'll say no more so as not to spoil Jim, but definitely hope that it continues when you have a show like that you enjoy so much. You want to see it play out while it's still good, but not to the point that it gets terrible. So Netflix is typically pretty good about that, though. So we'll see. In any event, well, that brings us to the end of our show for this week. Thanks, everyone, so much for joining us. Glad to have you with us, as always. Jim, where can people find you online if they want to shout at you?
You can find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico, or you can tweet me at JJP Out West. All one word, JJP Out West.
Most excellent. And Will, how about you?
Look for me on Twitter, whatever Cove, C-O-V-E. Look for me on Facebook, William Lindis. Send me a message instead of doing a random invite. I'll be more likely to talk to you / accept you if I know who you are. Also look for me on Letterboxd. Just look for me by my name there. That's where I go to log and talk about movies, kind of when I'm not here.
All right. Awesome. And you can find me on Facebook under my name, Brad Harris. Same deal. Send me a message first. Let me know you're a listener from the show, so I know you're not some random robot like trolling my friends lists and just randomly adding people. You can also find me on Twitter at iBradPro. Would love to hear from you. Take care, everybody. We will see you all next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
And soon to be hello.
Yay. Cannot wait. Bye-bye.